For newcomers to the official Touhou Project games, Embodiment of Scarlet Devil is the one that people usually start with. It is the very first game following the soft reboot of the series for the Windows platform. Being easily the most iconic game in the series, the characters introduced in it have received the lion's share of the spotlight over the years, both in canon and fan content. Naturally, we know a lot about the members of its cast compared to the games that have followed in the 20+ years since its release. And then there's Rumia. Rumia is the very first character that the player will come across in Touhou 6, and yet aside from a couple of articles or guest appearances, we don't ever really see her again. She's simply one of the many characters we aren't given a lot of information on. Really, what is there to know? Consider Touhou to be a giant canvas, and Zun its painter. And yet many times as each element he paints, or character he writes, nears completion, he stops and starts to draw something else completely elsewhere. This is how he writes characters. He may return to give them more details later, or he may not. A lot of people get understandably frustrated at this approach. While a lot of characters he writes are static and require no character arc, some are written with unanswered questions or conflicts. It's like being given access to the first half of a character's story only to find out there's no conclusion despite the writer continuing the work. It used to be my biggest gripe with the series, but if you're inclined to listen, I would ask that you hear my humble defense of his methodology. And the vehicle for this being none other than Rumia and the fanwork YouReimu by Joyful, a work often erroneously transliterated as Osana Reimu. I will be spoiling the entire series in this video, so consider watching it if you haven't already. Many Touhou fanworks assume at least a surface-level understanding of the series. However, YouReimu does something interesting. It can be watched and understood well enough by a complete newcomer. However, fans with a deeper understanding of the canon will receive a comparatively richer experience and appreciation for how it presents its story. So again, what do we know about Rumia? She's seemingly weak, not very smart, and is a yokai of darkness. And yet, the first thing the viewer is greeted with is a much different Rumia, and for that matter, a much different Reimu. We are then told directly, this is a story of when Yukkureimu was still young, and the man-eating yokai was big. We can then infer the story is meant to take place in the past, albeit a confusing one. The story is broken up into 8 parts, and this first one makes an immediate, masterful draw at its audience. Reimu and Rumia are nothing like in canon. They treat each other like family. Meanwhile, Reimu's mom is a major character. It forces people familiar with the canon into a position where they cannot rely on their knowledge to understand the situation. But in its place, a morbid curiosity takes hold. What's going to happen to Rumia? If they are like this, why doesn't Reimu remember her in Touhou 6? Why is Reimu's mom wearing a weird mask? Why is Rumia called the man-eating yokai? Why does Rumia have Reimu's bow? The entire first part is a happy and carefree introduction to the characters. Suspiciously happy, given the future that this audience is likely more familiar with. One could reasonably conclude that there isn't a happy answer to their questions, or any that follow. The story's presentation is wholly aware that it is in the past to the viewer's perspective, and takes full advantage of it by planting these questions in your mind at its first opportunity. It builds anticipation through anxiety and suspense. It is not foreshadowing. It is a promise. We are then introduced to little Marissa. Contrary to the one we are familiar with in canon, she is extremely timid and cries easily. Meanwhile, Reimu is overwhelmingly friendly and outgoing. This is fun to see because it implies their personalities inverted as they got older. And in this story, Rumia is shown to be the initial push that forms their iconic friendship. We are shown just how deeply Rumia cares for Reimu, only making those initial questions all the more concerning. But then we are given Rumia's backstory and how she came to live in peace at the shrine with Reimu. She was once an extremely dangerous yokai who overindulged in eating humans, citing an emptiness that could not be sated. Rumia is quickly defeated by Reimu's mom, and rather than killing her, she is captured and left to sit outside like a kid in timeout. But during her imprisonment, she meets Reimu, and slowly but surely, she is won over by her unconditional kindness. And all of this is orchestrated by Reimu's mom. The flashback ends with Rumia realizing that she had found something that satisfied her emptiness, a sense of belonging and family. But there is still the lingering worry of what lies ahead, and Yukari arrives just to remind us of this. Happiness is the sort of thing that can slip away in an instant. A bit later, we see the family go to a festival together, but alongside the festivities, we see the humans muttering to themselves about Reimu and her mom. Deciding to leave, they head back, only for Reimu to realize she had lost her bow. It is here that Rumia gives Reimu her own bow, paralleling the earlier scene of Reimu offering Rumia a rice ball during her imprisonment. All is well, and Reimu falls asleep comfortably as the adults watch the fireworks. We then learn the story behind Reimu's mom and why she wears the mask. As she fought dangerous yokai and earned their animosity, even humans began to fear her. The mask was a way to escape those looks of fear, and she believes one day Reimu will see her this way as well. However, it is Rumia who reassures her that Reimu would never do such a thing, and beyond that, she is grateful to the mom as well. Rumia's words end up being enough to remove both her literal and figurative mask. At this point, everyone seems to have their character arcs concluded. And so, Reimu's mom simultaneously activates every accumulated death flag by saying, "Carefree days like this are what they probably call happiness." It is at this point the story takes its inevitable turn. Literal seconds after this, and upon seeing Reimu's blood, Rumia's yokai instincts start to kick in. The viewer knows that the happy times are about to end. As she tries to run away, Yukari informs her that she can no longer see the Shrine Maiden and her daughter, that her way of life is over. If Rumia does not eat humans, she will die, or more likely, lose control and try to eat everyone. Yukari reveals that is her true nature as the yokai of darkness. Happiness is the sort of thing that can slip away in an instant. Yukari reminds Rumia and us as viewers of her previous warning, and after being told all of this, Rumia simply chooses to starve herself. In the midst of this long, torturous process, she hears Reimu calling for her. Rumia barely holds herself back until Reimu's mom arrives and reassures her daughter that she will see Rumia again. And the reason for this, she says, is because Rumia loves you. Yukari visits Rumia one last time, only for her to once more refuse to eat humans. Before Rumia can leave to go see Reimu, the mom shows up, once more with her mask on. She is hiding herself from Rumia. To the mom's side is a replacement Rumia, because she is the darkness that is necessary for the world to exist. The replacement will not bother with such troublesome thoughts, and so the original must die. Rumia is understandably upset, asking if all of her happiness was a lie, if she was simply being toyed with. Reimu's mom confirms this, and they begin to fight. The mom continuously eggs her on, but despite being toyed and lied to, Rumia cannot bring herself to kill. Even if it was fake, that happiness was real to her. Reimu's mom prepares her ultimate attack. It seems like the end, and then a miss. "The next one won't miss," she says, despite Rumia not even attempting to dodge it. Once more, she begins her finishing attack. At that moment, Rumia decides that she was happy. She imagines little Reimu in front of her, and in reaching out to touch her, she lands a mortal blow. The mom never had any intention of killing her. Yukari stands on the sidelines, heartbroken, and in proper fashion, she breaks the barrier between audience and creation. Are you crying too, Gensokyo? She could be speaking to the world itself, or perhaps to the viewers. We watch the false Rumia fall apart, and then Mom tells real Rumia that it must have been hard being all alone, that she did a good job, and that she was sorry she lied. You can't die yet. You finally found what you were looking for. Reimu's mom was always just like Rumia, all alone, and finally, her mask breaks and falls off. She is no longer able to hide. You and Reimu have already given me more than enough happiness. With one last dying wish, Reimu's mom seals Rumia using her own ribbon. Rumia is then reborn into the small, childlike darkness that we all know. Even her memories are gone. She has devoured all of the darkness she could ever need, thanks to the mom's sacrifice. Yukari considers killing her right there, but hesitates, and inevitably chooses not to. Rumia is free to live as she likes. But then, we return to the shrine. Little Reimu, who was waiting for Rumia to return, now sits on the veranda, waiting for both Rumia and her mother, unaware that now, neither of them will come home. As one last mercy, Yukari alters Reimu's memories to forget everything. And so things appear to end on a bitter note. But we are afforded one last scene where Rumia stumbles upon Reimu playing, and the two are reunited, neither having memory of one another, but drawn to each other anyways. And so ends the story of Rumia who was big and Reimu who was small. But there was one thing about Rumia that I chose not to mention at the start of this video. Within Touhou 6's omake text, Rumia's profile reads, "The ribbon tied to her hair is actually a charm. She can't touch it even though there have been times when she wanted to take it off." We were never given a formal explanation as to what this charm was, leaving fans to simply wonder. And so, someone wrote a story of just how she got that ribbon. Unanswered questions gave rise to ideas that could utilize canon in crafting a greater story. The half-finished piece on Zun's canvas was copied and finished with someone else's imagination. YouReimu tells a very simple story. It doesn't have a profound message, and even the story beats are fairly predictable. But none of that really matters if it's executed well. And considering how people still talk about it today, I would say that it probably was. Either that or it's because of the highly exploitable Reimu faces. In contrast to my video essay where I liken the series to a fairy tale that inherently demands a happy ending, Touhou manages to support darker interpretations all the same. While the canon works may choose to skim over the darker aspects, it grants fan creators free reign over them. While YouReimu isn't what I would qualify as dark, it is a good example of presenting an altogether different vibe from canon. But more importantly, it illustrates the strengths of leaving fans not just creative freedom, but a myriad of questions for them to present their own answers. This doesn't mean Zun should keep everything static. We may one day get answers for some of these things. I think many people would love that. Gensokyo is a well-defined sandbox, but a sandbox nonetheless. It is an expansive canvas, yet one with vacant regions that allow creators to ask themselves what might fit there. They may paint freely without trampling on anything already established by canon. And while none of them are truly the original canvas, we all love sharing and celebrating each other's creations. It would not be an exaggeration to say my love of Touhou's lore stems from a desire to fully appreciate its fan works. It is an expansive series that provokes stories about the characters from its fans. Rather than asking them to wait warmly, it beckons them onto the stage to bring forth their own canvas, and maybe inspire the next generation of creators to do the same.